Hello, hello. Welcome to Orgasmica. I'm your host, Virginia Novello, Tantra guide, sexuality advocate, and human being. This is your space for unlocking the power of pleasure, creativity, and self discovery. Together, we'll explore the depths of sexuality, dive into intimate conversations about healing, and all around wonderful things with our experts. Whether you're here to transform, heal, or simply get curious, I'm here to guide you on this journey of awakening and empowerment. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's get orgasmic. I have a very beautiful guest today. Her name is Christina. I love saying it in Spanish. Christina.
Sounds so good.
She is a love coach, and we got introduced by a mutual friend, a really, really dear friend. And she was like, "You guys need to meet," and we got introduced that way. And I totally understand what she was saying. We met over Zoom the first time we met, and we talked forever. And then we found that we had so many things in common, and that we had so many topics that we could talk about. And now you created a beautiful mastermind of amazing women. And I have the pleasure to be in this mastermind with you, just sharing our businesses and cheering on each other. And that I love doing that for other women. And I love being in a space that you created. So, welcome to the space.
Yes, it's so wonderful being here with you. And it's just a gift to have you in the mastermind because you bring so much amazing energy. So,
Thank you so much, Christina. It's so fun. It is really fun. I am just so curious about you because I know what you do, and
yeah.
I sort of have gotten, because I don't know you for that long, so I've gotten pieces and bits of your story and why you became a love coach, which is, I think, something that it is so interesting, and I think it touches into a lot of things. One of them is like I have so many friends, right, that are single and not necessarily single by choice, meaning like they do want to find their person, the one, the love
Mhm.
of their life. And well, people keep saying that LA is really hard to date.
Mhm.
Uh, and this was all before, I mean, I dated before the apps came in, like I didn't have the app game. But
Right.
now I feel like it has gotten even more complex and complicated, and everybody's trying to find that person. And I think your story, I want to know about your story. You were single and then you did certain things.
Yeah.
And I know you are married and have a beautiful daughter. So I want to hear that.
Oh, good, because I love telling that story. And I love being like, hopefully a beacon of light for those friends that you talked about and anyone single who is listening, because I was in that position so long. Just like dating was just a struggle for decades. Like, I don't think anyone becomes a love coach who was like really good at it and like, found love with no problem because it wasn't like a thing in their life that they had to overcome. Most love coaches that I know have had to do this journey, right? And then like along the journey, the rockiness of that journey, we learn what we then have to teach others. So that's what it was like for me. It was like I just, for a couple of decades, and I lived in a lot of different cities when I was dating, right? So, I did my grad school in the Midwest in St. Louis and Chicago. Then I moved to Santa Barbara for my university job. And then I was dating people in LA. And so, by the way, everyone thinks dating sucks in their town, right? So it's like, I have heard dating is horrible in LA. But dating apparently is also horrible in New York and Boston and small towns, big cities. So let's face it, dating just can be hard. Like we can just say that. Like there are definitely like disappointments with dating, letdowns, there are setbacks. And when you experience so many of those over time, it can just feel really compounded and it can feel like the future is not going to look any different from the past or present. And that was definitely my experience. I just felt like I couldn't make anything stick. And so, like a lot of single women, it felt like there were like these two options. Like, it was either I was not into the person, right? I was not into like the guy, or I was into the guy and then like I wouldn't get picked. He would like ghost me or fizzle or like pick someone else. And so I had to realize finally that like the only reason I was seeing those two options was because I had this belief that love wasn't for me, right? That
Mm.
I was different, that I was somehow like broken, I was like too wounded, like I just wasn't going to find it, right? And so when we're living in this belief, we will not take any actions or see any different possibilities besides like these, actions or opportunities that are actually like putting us back into these places where it feels like nothing's good is going to happen. So I had to do a lot of healing, a lot of inner child healing. And I found that the only way I really felt transformation was if it went through the body. Like it's if I could like feel it on the inside. And I listened to your solo podcast where you said we somaticize everything. That definitely happens with love and relationships. We just store all that in the body, right?
Yeah.
And so it was my process of just like healing those blocks that turn things around for me with love.
Do you feel like those beliefs were like a childhood
Yeah.
beliefs that then they
Yeah.
transform into adulthood? Or do
Yeah.
you feel like, because what I'm also seeing, which I also believe that a lot of the
Yeah.
beliefs we have, right, are
Yeah.
coming from somewhere in the childhood.
Hmm.
But I also feel like there's certain beliefs that are equated with experiences,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like, damn, like the
Yeah.
first heartbreak that we
Yeah.
have, just so formative, and we create
Right.
beliefs and stories
Right.
around that, and then
Hmm.
around how we are treated with men or in
Yeah.
general, with like relationships. But I feel like that first heartbreak, whenever we have that, which is
Mm.
usually early 20s or something, something
Hmm.
happens because
Hmm.
the innocence, which is the first time you fall in love, has this innocence because you don't fucking
Right.
know. You don't know what's on the other side.
Yes, exactly.
And so it's like something happens that I feel
Yeah.
like it's a rite of passage almost, that you have
Yeah.
through it in
Yeah.
order to grow up and in order to feel that but there's so many people that do not and don't get over that
Yeah.
first thing. Do you
Hmm.
feel like that is a separate thing, or do you still feel like that heartbreak experience also
Yeah.
has to do with childhood, or do you feel like they can be separate things?
I think that's a really good question. Of course, it's going to be different for everyone, but I do feel like, how what you do with that first heartbreak, it can oftentimes be sort of determined by what your experience was like, early on.
Mhm.
So like my experience was like that I was left out of love, that I felt I had this belief that I was the middle child of three,
Mhm.
three daughters, three sisters, and my dad clearly preferred my older sister. Like, let's just like call a spade a spade. Like
Okay.
that was obvious.
Over it.
Exactly. Yes, you do. Yes, exactly. And then my mom like really babied my younger sister because she was the baby. And I was constantly in this position of never feeling chosen. And that came out as like tantrums and just being really like willful and reactive, which only sort of drove my parents away further from me and like sort of reinforce that belief like, oh look, I'm really not chosen. If I'm not being good or achieving, or behaving well, then I am not chosen, right? I don't get love. And so that definitely played out in my love life. So like if you take a situation like that, Virginia, and you have someone going into their first heartache with that belief, coming out of the heartache on the other side, you could be like, well, that was just evidence, right? That I'm not chosen, right? I don't get love. I would like to believe, and I don't know if this is the case for everyone, but people who had a different experience with childhood, and like we all have moments in childhood where we don't get needs met. We all have these little like woundings that we're trying to heal from. But if that belief hasn't really taken root in childhood, if you felt like if your parents were able to like, or your early caregivers were able to like help you feel that you get love no matter what, you might have a different experience coming out of that heartache. It's still gonna like hurt like hell.
Yeah,
It's still gonna be horrible, but like there might be a part of you that can still believe that something better could be coming down the line.
100%. What was really interesting
Mhm.
for me to discover
Yeah.
is that those woundings did not come
Hmm.
out from my dad, which is the
Mm,
first place that we sort of like look into, right?
totally.
They
Yeah.
actually came from my grandfather.
Interesting.
Because I
Yeah.
was very, like, deeply in
Yeah.
love with my grandfather. I was, like, so
Oh,
attached to him,
yeah.
and when my brother was born, my
Hmm.
grandfather was soccer player. He paid so much attention to my brother because he had four daughters too, and I was then the first
Yeah.
daughter. And I felt really replaced. I felt
Wow.
like he replaced me in a
Yeah.
sense. And so when I discovered, it's like, it's so interesting too that
Yeah.
our parents, yes, they're our first, but I grew up with my grandparents being
Yeah.
around. I grew up in the Mexican culture,
Right.
have family around all the time.
Right.
So it could be aunts, uncles, grandparents, and sometimes also the blogs and the hurts can come from like school and
Oh
so when we
yeah.
childhood it can
Uh-huh.
come from a different place. It was really interesting for me.
Teachers.
Like, oh, this thing about relationships and men had
Yeah.
nothing to do with my dad. Which
Exactly. Yeah.
thing it was about my grandfathers.
Interesting. Yeah. And that's our early love map.
Mhm.
Exactly, right? And like that love map can be formed in so many different ways. Like, yeah, our early caretakers, not only like how we experienced or did not experience love from them, but like how we saw them give love and receive love, from each other or, did or did not. So like all of these really kind of form this blueprint. And I think you're right. It's not all about the early childhood stuff, although that is often our early template, but
Mhm.
there's also like collective trauma, right?
Yeah,
There's ancestral trauma, especially like for women. There's
yeah,
so much in and also like my experience dating as like a white, straight, middle class woman, so different from, other women who are having other experiences, right? Who are women of color or like, LGBTQ plus, right? There's so much in the collective that
yeah.
is impacting the dating experience. Like there's so much that we need to heal on the outside
Yeah, yeah,
too. That definitely plays a
there's
role
just
in
so many
dating.
layers. Yeah, there's so
Yeah,
many there's just
there
like
are.
cultural and religious and what you
Yeah.
saw, then
Yeah.
the experience of your ancestors and then the experience that you have and the experience that you bring on
Yes.
to. It's like it's
Yeah.
layer upon layer. That's why healing is like an onion, right? And it's like
It
you just
is.
peeling all the layers and it
Yeah.
feels like a never ending thing, but it's also the exciting thing to me. When I started actually, instead of being like, oh, will this healing thing be over? It was like, this is cool. Like I get to find myself in all these layers and find deeper layers of who I am within the collective, within myself, within my experiences, within my family, and that's always ever changing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
so
seeing
you
it as a
were,
journey. Yeah.
yes, that is, man, that is fun.
Yeah.
Being a
And
human
I
being.
do feel that like once we do that healing on ourselves on the inside, we're so much more able and empowered to like, work with the collective traumas, like, the isms, all the isms and phobias on the outside. Like once we do that healing on ourselves, like we are so much more prepared to like take on those very real, impediments that are in the actual external world, including with dating and love and relationships.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
And so, and tell me what
The
happened. So
good
you
stuff,
get
right?
healing. How did that start? How did you meet
Yeah.
your husband?
Yes. Well, I love telling the story of how I met my husband because it was like a few years really of like, yes, doing that deep kind of somatic work, working with therapists, working with energy healers and, kind of somatic guides and love coaches too. I did, love coaching programs. And I really had to like get to this place where I could believe that things could change for me. And I was approaching 40 and I knew I really wanted to have kids. And so for women, that is a huge trigger, the 40th birthday
Yeah.
approaching, it doesn't necessarily have to be. I think there's a lot of cultural stories about like it's where women are like a wash up after 40. It's very detrimental. It's just serving the patriarchy, like all of these, stories are, but women can really take that on. And I certainly did too. So, like, when I turned 39, I was like, I am going to meet my person by my 40th birthday. Like, it is just, I got really strong and intentional about that. And, I had to train myself to date in a different way. And it was like really honoring my no, like saying, like getting clear on the kind of person that I wanted to be with. And I actually had this really cool dream, like 8 or 10 months before I met Darren, where it was like I met this street musician and he was like playing on a street corner, just singing his heart out. And like when he was singing, I could like feel his heart vibrations. And I just was drawn to him and I went up to him and started talking to him and it was just like, woo, there was so much to share. And I wrote down that dream. I was like, this man seemed about 10 years older than me, and there were like all these things that I wrote down that were later, like that was so Darren in the dream. Like, and he even plays the
Oh,
guitar and sings and he used to sing on street corners when he was younger. but that dream helped me get clear on like the qualities I wanted in a partner is like someone who leads with his heart, someone like a beautiful listener. I had like these five, someone spiritual, like on the path to evolution. Once I was like, I am only going to date people with these core values who want the same things that I want, the same level of commitment and want a family. Dating just got so much easier. I stopped getting this mindset. I got to give people a chance. I'm stopped lowering my standards. I like really committed to them and just kind of filtered everyone out. And then I had to train myself to not see every disappointment as some kind of predictor of my future, like
Mm,
something that I could just sort of cleanse, take
yeah.
care of with compassion, and then just see dating as like another blank slate the next time I ventured out there. And when dating really got good, there were like three amazing guys in the picture, and I was like, what when did this happen? All of a sudden, like they were both like really attractive. Like, I mean, all three of them really attractive, really spiritual. We had a great connection, and Darren was one of them. So I basically just kind of kept getting to know all of them. And like it was like this sign from the universe. Like I met Darren. We connected on the Insight Timer app. I don't know if you know that part. We actually met.
No, wait, no, don't know that. Oh, wow.
Insight Timer. I was like writing to people in Insight Timer after I meditated, saying like, thanks for meditating with me or sending messages. Cause I was like, I'm just going to be really open and
Oh,
just meet a lot of people who might seem aligned.
yeah.
And like his message came through and I was literally like sitting on my couch in Santa Barbara and I like looked at his picture and I was like, oh my God, he's so cute. And I was like, wait, that's not far away. Work. So, and then we met in person. And then when he asked me out, he sent me a text and he was like, can you get together again on March 20th? That was the date of my 40th birthday. Like he
Mm.
literally picked the date of my 40th birthday to ask me for a second date. And
And did
I
you
was
say
like,
yes? Did you have her on your
yeah, we
birthday?
did. We went. I didn't tell him it was my 40th birthday because I didn't want to like put pressure on it. I told
Yeah,
him later, but the universe really delivered that one. Really, like
yeah, you will meet him before your 40th birthday. You do like,
I
hey.
know it was.
Well,
Yeah.
that is just such a beautiful story. And
Thank
I
you.
love that you said that you got really intentional.
Yeah.
And then one of the things that I love that you said is that when things are not working, when you're like not wanting to give a person a second chance and all this stuff,
Yeah.
what I heard is you don't make it personal.
Yes.
Like you don't let
Yeah.
it dictate that that says something about you, which
Exactly.
I do feel like that is one of the hardest things of dating.
Yeah.
It feels like,
Yeah.
first off, it feels like it's people that are single, like in the collective,
Mhm.
like the message that we get, it's
Oh,
like, oh, you're single? Like, what's wrong with
no,
this person who's single, right?
you're so
And
right.
that's such
Hmm.
a wrong message to send.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like there are people that are married and coupled that are like the most toxic ever. And like,
Yeah.
like one thing has nothing to do with the other.
Yeah.
But it's like the question that a lot of my single friends get is like, why are you single? Why are you single still? And
The
I'm just like,
worst.
why does it matter? And it's like what happens to me with kids, right? People are like, are you not a mom? Like what? It's like asking, stop.
Like that's a measure of your worth. Yes.
Exactly. It is not a measure of your worth. Your being single and looking for love
Yeah.
doesn't dictate, or you having a couple of dates that are not working out doesn't dictate the worth of who you are as a woman.
Yeah. Hmm.
How did you get to the point where you actually were able to implement that thought
Yes.
into
Oh my
your
God.
actual perspective?
You're asking the million-dollar question, Virginia. And this is like when I get to this point with my love coaching clients, this is like where it gets really fragile, right? Because we've done all the inner work and then we've like created a high vision for love.
Mhm.
We've like reworked the dating profile. So it's like really targeting the person that they want to be with, right? And found like a plan for meeting people in real life. And then when you get out in the dating world, how do you keep that solid when there's disappointments, right? And it's exactly what you said. It's like, how do you make different meaning from those experiences, versus like, this is something that's about me, right?
Right.
So that's why this really builds on the inner work, right? Where you're just kind of focusing on self-love for a while and getting that really solid in yourself, because then you have something to come back to. But once again, I feel like that has to go through the body. And I just finished a session with a client where we did a practice together. If you're open to it, I could like do the practice with you where
Oh,
you
yeah.
kind of go through the body because you have to clear that out first.
Mhm.
I call it a process of like clearing out and
Mhm.
then filling back up, right? So you kind of clear, you have to honor that disappointment. You have to validate that. You
Mhm.
have to like be willing to clear it. And then you can go back and bring in the positive affirmations, like holding the future vision, so that the next time you step back out at the dating world, it does feel like a new, like another like cosmic red carpet could be rolled out at any minute, right? And your person could just like walk towards you on that carpet, right? Like you have to have that perspective of like things could shift at any moment.
And I love what you
Mhm.
said, that part of the healing thing is to actually feel it.
Yes.
So, because I
Mhm.
feel like then what we do is like, I'm not supposed to feel like that.
Yeah.
We feel on top
Right.
of feeling bad, we then feel bad about feeling the
Right.
feeling. So then we just
Yes.
put more things on top of each other.
Exactly.
And then we have this mix. It's like, no, I'm not supposed to feel that. So I'm going
Right.
to work it away because I see so many women working it away, or like, I'm going to
Yeah.
go out and like drink with my friends. So I'm like, yeah, that's all
Mhm.
good and amazing. But if you don't feel the
Yes.
disappointment, feel what it feels in your body. So
Yeah.
then you can be like, this is not, and say
Yeah.
the affirmations that is like, this is not who I am. That
Yeah.
does not dictate my value as a human being or as a
Yes.
woman, you know?
Absolutely. And what you just said, like, the Buddha called that the second arrow. The first arrow is like the feeling itself. The
Mhm.
second arrow is like our judgment on the feeling, like this is wrong, like I shouldn't feel it, right? And I feel like this is where sort of law of attraction manifestation stuff can go wrong because, like people can kind of misinterpret as like, if I have any negative feeling, like I'm screwed, like I'm not gonna attract in love, I'm not gonna manifest what I want. Whereas like it's really the opposite. If you're just sort of like covering over all those really valid human emotions with positive like reinforcements, you're actually impeding the flow of positive energy that makes the law of attraction work, right? You have to really deal with the pain first,
Yeah.
before you can kind of go back to like holding that future vision. So yeah, that's beautiful what you just said.
No, it's lovely that you can walk through people through all this stuff because yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not only like we were saying, it's not only I feel like shit because I should be like, the clock is running out,
Yeah.
but also it used to like if we talk about systematic and
Yeah.
ancestors, a
Yeah.
woman that was single used to be a woman, not only society used to like look at her
Yeah.
up, down upon, but
Hmm.
you were not like nobody was going to take care of you, and if nobody was going to take care of you, you didn't have money, you couldn't work, you couldn't do all these things. So
Yeah.
I feel like we do have it in a very somatic way,
Yes,
you
you're
know
right.
no, like single me, even though
Yeah.
you can work, you can make your own money, you can be perfectly okay single, and there's some people that choose to be single, which is
Yeah.
that's amazing, which is people that also choose to be child free, also an amazing, like
Yeah.
I like praise everybody's choice,
Yeah.
but it is a choice.
It is. Exactly.
So, why do you think that, or like, what was your experience and what do you hear with your clients? Why do you
Yeah.
feel that we want love, that we want partnership?
Like, why do we want that? Yeah.
Mm.
Well, Tara Brach says this so beautifully, like in her book, her most recent book, which is Radical Compassion, I think. Someone asked her that very question, like, is it wrong to want intimacy? Is it wrong to want to be in a partnership? Because there's so, like, the self-love movement is so much like, just love yourself and you're okay. And like, that's great. But it acts like there's this quota for love, like if you love yourself is enough and then you can't want more, right? But she says it so beautifully. She says like we're wired for intimacy since we're little, from like that moment of like this, this bonding with our early caretakers. Like we're wired for that. It's okay to want that. It's
Yeah.
really empowering if you want that. If you don't want it, that's okay too. We recently found out, I love the story in my family, that like my great grandmother lived down the street from Susan B. Anthony in Rochester, New York. So I've been reading about her. This woman, she just opted out of partnership her whole life and like made her own living giving talks and like made her own fame, right? So it's like we have that. We do have those examples too, but like more often it's like, yeah, these stories of like, you are like, unless you're like one half of a partnership, right? Then, women have to often like defend that, right? So
Yeah.
I think both choices can be empowering. And I feel like sometimes women or singles in general are afraid to like admit that they're seeking love or they want love because they feel like they're going to be like pitied, looked down upon, or judged, or they don't want to come off as needy. But really, it's like I feel like it's an extremely empowering choice to like first grow your own self love practice and then grow that self-love practice in connection and relationship with someone else, right? And have that person be able to reflect back to you, and to have that the intimacy grow, because like all your stuff comes right back up, as you know, like when you are in intimate connection with someone. So like the healing continues. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, the
Hmm.
healing continues and then the healing expands even more so. I think
Yes,
like with partnership,
I believe,
it's
yeah.
not like, oh, I found love. Okay, I'm okay. It's like,
Done. Right.
yeah, no, a lot of shit is gonna come out. I don't feel that way, It's like, which is
Motherhood too. Yes.
it's also amazing that we get to also be mirrors for one another. But I think you're
Yeah.
an absolutely right because I do
Mhm.
see a trend of
Yeah.
like you should be okay just being by yourself.
Yeah.
And then there's something wrong wanting to not,
Hmm.
And it's like, especially as a woman, like if
Yeah.
you are a feminist, if you want the good of the collective of womanhood, right?
Yeah.
It's like, like almost saying, oh, I want to be with a man or I
Hmm.
want to be with a woman. I want to be
Yeah.
with a partner. And
Anyone.
gender
Yeah. Hmm.
feels depowering and almost
Yeah.
like, oh no, are we going back
Mhm.
to, the patriarchy and like all of that stuff? Because
Right.
I need love and I need a man. And I feel like it is okay to say, I want a partnership. I
Hmm.
want to live my life like this
Yeah.
with a partner, whatever your gender choice of that is. But
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like it's so beautiful and empowering to say
Mm.
it and then hear people like you
Yeah.
say it too is like, no, I wanted it and I made a choice.
Yeah.
Now, were you saying that to other people? How was your experience?
Not at first. Oh my gosh, you asked the best questions. No, it like I feel like it was something I swept under the rug. And I remember I went on a hike with one of my single friends in Santa Barbara, and she asked, because I was like talking about my troubles with dating. She's like, "Do you know what you want?" She's like, "Do you want marriage? Do you want partnership?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't really know." And I realized like I hadn't, like I did want it, but it was so buried. I was so used to feeling like I had to hide that it just felt too vulnerable to say it. And that was another big shift when dating got better for me, when I said full on, in my dating profile what I wanted. Like, do you want marriage? Yes. Do you want kids? Yes. Even though I was 40, and like some women are like, okay, if I'm approaching 40 and I still want kids, I'm not going to put in my dating profile because I don't want to scare people off. But it's actually the opposite. Like you
And I
have to own exactly what you want so you can filter those people out, like who don't what you want, or like have the limiting beliefs about like your age, right? You have to move towards claiming what you want. So yes, I got more and more. I got in the practice, especially being around family, of talking as if this is going to happen. Like I would say things like, well, I'm in Santa Barbara for now, but when I meet my partner, who knows where I'm going to end up? So that they knew that I was relating to my future self in that way, that I knew there was a partnership and family out there for me. And they started relating to me that way too, Like it was, like even kind of joking about my best friend here in West Hollywood, with his partner, they would sort of joke about it, like, oh, who's driving to breakfast today? And is it Christina or Christina's future partner? It just became a thing, like a placeholder. Like people just knew that was my vision for my life, and they started leaning into it for me. And I feel like they respected that and saw that as strong.
beautiful. That's
Mm.
beautiful. That's beautiful that you had people around that honored that, and they
Yeah.
were not shutting that down or making you feel
Yes.
bad for wanting it. Or,
Yeah.
there's also so many stories like, oh, well, if you're 40, blah, 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 you should do this, you should do that,
The
you should move,
worst.
you should like all the
The
things
worst.
they say. And so, yes, I love
Yeah.
that story. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing.
and look, it's okay to be selective about who you share it with, right? Because you've got a lot of Debbie Downers in your life, or people who are like really pessimistic, cynical about love. You don't want to like share your highest vision with them. They're just going to
Maybe your
stomp on
family
it.
is not it, maybe your family
Yeah,
is not it, but maybe you do
yeah.
with a couple of friends
With
like you did.
friends.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And even like on dates, just fully owning it. Like if someone asked me, like Darren asked me on that second date on my 40th birthday, like, oh, do you want kids? And I was just like, yes. And I said nothing about my age. I was like, yes, I do. Just like
Oh,
solidly, like
yeah.
this is what I want. Yeah.
Because why are we gonna apologize for or
Yeah.
wants, It's like, no, this is what I want. And like,
Yes.
I'm not gonna apologize for my age or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's
Ab-
like,
yeah.
know that you are with your partner and you
Yeah.
do have a kid,
Yeah.
which is so beautiful to see this
Oh.
story awful realized. Do you feel like it was at the right time. Because a lot of people, right? They
Yeah.
wait for the right timing. Maybe it's not the right time.
Yes.
No, a lot of people also are tired of maybe
I
hearing
know.
that because we hear it with everything too. It's like it's
Right.
God's time, it's not yours. And it was like, yes, we have to sort of be
Yeah.
patient too, because
Yeah.
on the other side, we don't know why, but things sort
Yeah.
of happen for the way. Now that you are on that side,
Yeah.
feel like you're with your right person, and do you
Oh,
feel like you met at the right time?
percent. Like I cannot see myself living my life with anyone else. We are just so connected. We're just such amazing compliments for each other. Like it really like I feel in love every day. You know, not that there aren't issues that we have to work through, but we do work through them in a very like conscious way. As far as the right timing, Darren's always saying, like, gosh, I just wish we would have met earlier because, you know, he had a whole other 20-year marriage like before me and like wanted kids, you know, for a long time, but his first partner did not want kids. And I always say, like, I wouldn't have been ready for you. Like, I just wasn't in a place where I could have received like this therapist, spiritual, like mindfulness, meditate. I had to get there myself in order to like call in someone like this and like really appreciate it. Now, I would have said at 35, no, that should have been the right time. By that, I was pretty much like, this needs to happen, right? 36. But, and I will say that, I felt completely and totally ready to meet Darren like a couple months after I turned 39. I just finished like the Calling in the Catherine Woodward Thomas's famous like Calling in the Wood
Well,
course.
the
I did her
one
book, yeah, and
that
then I did her
will
course, and
come up too, by the way.
yeah, it's so good. Yeah, and I learned a lot from her about changing the meaning you make from like a disappointment. But after I finished her course, I'm like, yeah, I'm ready. But what I learned is like, okay, when you're calling in love, there's another person in the equation, right? And they might not be ready for you. And so, even though I feel like I was really, truly ready right after I turned 39, I learned later Darren was still in another relationship that he was working his way out of, and he still had learning and healing to do from that. So, he left that relationship maybe 3 months before we met, and then he needed a lot of space to heal on his own before he was ready to meet me. So that's where the divine timing comes in. Like sometimes we are ready, but the partner who's walking their way towards us needs a little more learning themselves, right? And so like my learning in that year was to keep the faith even though the results weren't really happening on the outside,
For
you
sure.
know, until they did.
Now, can I ask you a question?
Yes. Your questions are the best. I'm like loving this.
I don't know, and this I'm going to tell you what I believe or not. I don't know. I believe in the one person.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, I don't think that there's one person. I do
Yeah.
believe in soul connections, and I
Yeah.
do happen to have, and I was lucky to have a couple, and I also have
Mhm.
soul connections with friends, you
Of
know,
course. Yeah.
have that soul connection with the person the
Yeah.
moment I see them. And I had that with a
Yeah.
couple of friends of mine that I saw them and I was like,
Yeah.
you, I've seen you, I've met you, I've been there. Yes,
Yeah.
I have that with a couple of
Mm.
relationships as well. I
Mhm.
haven't had like a lot of boyfriends. So
Mhm.
when I did, it was very
Yeah.
intentional. And I would say like there's two, one of them obviously being my husband,
Yeah.
a couple that I do feel like we had that soul connection. I
Yes.
feel like if something were to happen to my husband or something were to
Mhm.
happen to me, I
Mhm.
do feel like he could find somebody that it's not,
Yeah.
but he could
Mhm.
find that connection to
Mhm.
keep living his life. And
Of
I
course.
could do the same, even though we're so well matched, where,
Mm.
the relationship didn't start in the best of ways, but
Yeah.
it was, and it is beautiful, amazing partnership.
Mhm.
So, what are your beliefs when it comes to that?
Yeah.
Especially when we read books like Finding the One, right?
Right, calling him the one, right? Which I think like she kind of pulled back from because you know she didn't stay with the guy that inspired that book, and now she's with a new partner, right? So like when I did her coaching program, it was more like calling in your beloved, right? So, but yeah, I agree with you too, right? So here's how I've come to think of it, right? That you there can be multiple conscious connections. I think the most important thing is like you want to be with someone who's very aligned and capable of like what I call a sacred partnership, right? So a conscious partnership, right? So here's how I understand it, right? As we move along on our own evolution and growth, it's like when we reach sort of a new threshold of like our own sense of like worthiness and what we desire and feel like we're worthy for in a partner, we get opened up to a new sort of like football field of possibilities of partners, right? Who are, going to be sort of resonating on that same vibration,
Mhm.
right? And I think like, and then when we graduate somewhere else, right? And then then there's a whole other football field of possibilities of people who could be really right for us, right? So that football field is going to look different when you're 25, when you're 30, when you're 35, like when you're older. So I almost think it's like it's hard to hear this when you're in your late 30s or 40s with dating, but I almost feel like that's a real advantage, right? Because you've by then you've done so much graduating that the people that are in that football field are going to be much better matches, and you often have a stronger love when you meet later in life. That's been my experience. But my experience was like I do feel like I got to that point where like that new field of possibilities opened up, right? There's a new field of contenders, and I do feel like Darren, like for whatever reason, in that time and place where we were in our lives, he was the one that started moving towards me. Like when we kind of trace back of like where we were on each other's journeys, there's like all these like synchronicities, like he was brought back to Los Angeles from living 8 years in Miami, and I was California to Santa Barbara, for this job. And like there was just all these signs that we're moving towards each other. And for me, that dream was like an indication that I had 8 to 10 months before that for whatever reason in that field of possibilities, he's the one that started moving towards me, right? I guess it could have been anyone else also,
Right,
but
right,
it
right.
is,
But it's also like
yeah,
you said, the right timing, right? It's like,
yeah,
oh, we're also where we are, right? It's like our
yeah.
world is so big, and right now
It's a
we
great way
can
of thinking about it.
feel
Yeah.
the world everywhere, right? And so,
Yeah.
who are in your field where you are and where you're living,
Mhm.
and the coincidences and synchronicities that happen for whatever reason,
Absolutely.
right?
Or
It's like,
someone even from another country who's passing through, Los Angeles or where you are, right? So, yeah, there's just so much magic that happens with love. Like, I always say, I don't pretend to understand the math of love, like how many people would be right for you, but I do believe that you elevate your possibilities whenever you elevate yourself from the inside.
I love that. And I
Yeah.
want to touch with you something that we talked briefly about,
Yes.
which is where you're leaning a little bit. And that's what we talked a little bit about
Yeah.
in person, which is this whole idea where you're leaning towards more,
Yeah.
which is your feminine and your
Mhm.
pleasure as a woman.
Yeah.
And how are you integrating that into your coaching? And what do you think that is so important? Obviously, I am a
Yeah.
massive like fan speaking about that. And
Yeah.
I do believe that we need
Oh,
women more in their power and more in their
yeah.
pressure because we've been suppressed for a long time and
Mm-hmm.
ancestral, like we were saying,
Mm-hmm.
right? It comes from not us only,
Mm-hmm.
but generations of before us that we
Mm-hmm.
were not okay being in our bodies.
Yeah.
And some religious trauma that also comes within that.
Mm,
And I was on TikTok the other day and I was
yeah.
like reading I was like, this is like disturbing. Like
Mm,
TikTok can be a disturbing place just
yeah.
because of the way that people comment. And they were commenting, there was a person saying like, advocating for her just not wanting to have sex with her husband in that day, and she would say like, I don't want to have sex today, and like, and this woman was like, actually no, it is your as a god intended to for the men to use the woman's body for their pleasure.
Wow.
And I was like, I cannot believe like I'm hearing this. And and that comment had like 10,000 likes or something. And I was just like mindful that that's still like like people in the world that believe this. And
Oh, the
because
collective, yeah. Oh.
oh my goodness, because also it can come into like, sexual assault within your own marriage. Like
Mm-hmm.
women in their marriage get sexually assaulted and they
Mm-hmm.
cannot call it sexual assault because they're married and like all a bunch of other things that I'm not going to get into right now.
Yeah.
But I do feel like even in dating, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
dating, which there's a lot of rule, like don't sleep with him or sleep with him, and like
Right.
the day, and
Yeah.
like what people are missing in like the sleeping or not sleeping or fucking with him or not, or like
Yeah.
dealing with this is, are you connecting with him? How are you? So, what is your experience with that personally? But also, what is it that you're
Yeah.
seeing? How the world is changing, or what your
Mm-hmm.
clients are saying regarding sexual connection and pleasure?
Yeah. That it's such a hard one for me, and like for so many years, Virginia was like very fraught. Oh, and just it's so much in common with like your story of like how you grew up. You know, I didn't grow up in like the conservative place where you said you grew up, but yeah, definitely grew up in, this Catholic, background. And so there was so much messaging there about pleasure being wrong and anything in our bodies like being wrong. Like I remember, my sisters and I would be on the couch and maybe we'd have our hands under the couch and we're sort of exploring, our private parts. And my mom would like try to catch us. She's like raised, very Lutheran, strict, Protestant. She would like rip the blanket off to like make sure like we were it's like her. I don't mind telling that story because I know she's not going to listen to like a podcast called Orgasmica.
Either. So, hey, there.
Absolutely, right. So that took a long time for me to like heal from that, and to like actually embrace, my own sexuality. And I feel like I had more healing in that realm. I healed a lot more blocks in that realm before I could heal my blocks with love. Because I had a lot of like amazing like sexcapades when I was single that I look back at now. I'm just like, thank God, because like that was so exciting and it brought out like my inner like sex goddess. So I really encourage with my clients kind of like what you're talking about, like no matter what they're doing with dating is like doing that sexual exploration with yourself, like honoring your own sacred sexuality. And so I give practices for like opening up the sacral chakra because so many times like we can feel so shut down there, like, especially with that comment you just talked about, right? And kind of owning your own pleasure. But I had to have like people in my life, like one was a therapist, and one was an energy healer that had to like teach me that pleasure's okay. Like my first therapist, when I was just like, because I had the same thing you did, where I was like actually like blocked down there, like I wouldn't open, She was like, I want you to get a vibrator. She's like, don't worry about insertion, don't worry about penetration, you just find pleasure. She had to like give me that permission, And this energy healer, once he had me like sort of crawl on the floor on all fours and he's like, just move your body towards pleasure. Just move, like do what feels good. And that was, as an academic, as like someone raised Catholic, it was like really like kind of foreign to me. So I
Yeah,
had to be on that journey myself.
it is like so. I
Yeah.
always tell my
Yeah.
clients, like, but a lot of the exercises
Yeah.
I do, I go, move how your body wants it to move and feel
Yes.
pleasure into it. And a lot of
Yeah.
people go, I'm
Yeah.
like, how does your body want to move? Know how your head feels like it needs to
Yeah.
be sexy, but like, what does your body need? And like, I feel like there's that disconnection, right? We don't know our body. We're just
Right.
distant from our body. We're like disconnected from it. And so we
So
don't
true.
know what our
Hmm.
body needs. And so I think definitely exercises
Yeah.
like that and like connecting to the body is just so important.
Yes, absolutely. And your question about like, sexuality and dating, there is so much shame around sexuality for women, especially like so much shame. So I definitely always counsel my clients to like not take that on because, a lot of times I are in this place where like, okay, I don't want to like sleep with people who don't make me feel good. And that's also, that can be a choice to like opt out of like, the one night stands. And I think it can be a very like powerful choice if you know that that's the only thing that someone wants, right? And you want to be moving in a different direction. And also, like, if it happens, if you allow yourself to have that experience, like, don't take that on. Like, don't take on that shame. Like, allow yourself to enjoy that experience because you have the tools to take care of yourself, right? If there is like a disappointment or a heartache or a ghosting or a letdown, after that. So, yeah. So, for sure, it's like working with like, there's another love coach, Marnie Batista. I'm actually going to be on her podcast, interviewed for her podcast next week. But she has her company is called Dating with Dignity, and I love how she explained it. It was like, it's like how do you keep that dignity? Like whether you sleep with the guy or not, like whatever choices you make, like how do you date with your own dignity, right? It doesn't matter like what you're doing, but it's like how are you feeling about what you're doing?
Right. And it's what is your own perspective, not what other people tell you to, because I feel like
Yeah.
there's so many rules and regulations around
Yes.
being that might
Hmm.
not feel good for you and might
Right.
not feel good to you.
Yeah.
But so and so said it in this book, so I must say this or I must do this. And I'm like, but if you do not, and
Yeah.
your body doesn't align with that because you
Yeah.
might have a trauma about it, right? It is like
Yes.
don't call, blah, 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 or they're not going to call in 3 days. You might have a trauma of
Mhm.
abandonment and that doesn't fucking work for you, you know? Or like,
Exactly.
So you
Exactly.
be honest because you might
Yeah.
have to have like blah 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 and it doesn't work for you. So
Yeah.
when we put dating as a game of rule following
Oh, of
things instead of us
course.
listening to us and first
Hmm.
understanding what listening to us feels like and
Yeah.
moves like, then
Hmm.
we can then like you said date with that dignity. I love that word, that date with
Yeah.
that dignity and also date into what feels good to you, not
With
what other people are
authenticity.
telling you to do, right?
Absolutely. Like this whole question of like, how soon do I text? When do I text? It's like you text when you want. You text when it feels good, right? If you're texting compulsively, right, that's coming from like a wounded place inside of you.
Yep.
But if you're
Well,
texting from a
then,
place of inspiration,
yeah.
there's nothing stronger than that, right? And if the person does walk away or sees that as anything less than empowering, you just know. That's just information. Filtered
Uh,
another one out, move on. You're moving right along.
100%. So for our last question that I
Yes.
asked my guest, I want to ask you, what is an orgasmic life to you?
Oh my gosh. Okay, that is a hard one. Oh my God. Okay. So, I think this is like about that journey that you and I talked about is like where can you find embodied pleasure in all moments of your life, so kind of thinking I'm doing a lot of energy healing on myself these days. I have some chronic conditions I'm healing from, and just allowing myself to be like fully in my body when that energy is like coming through and like having that experience, or even like having like that warm mug of tea and like feeling that, like it making that really sensual. But like, how can I lean more into like what is bringing me pleasure, like in small ways and big ways, right? Because I still want to enjoy it in big ways, like with my husband, right? It's like when and you and I have talked about this, when he comes up behind me when I'm doing dishes, like sometimes my first instinct is like, come on, I'm just focused, I'm trying to get this done, right? But
Mhm.
instead, like, how can I lean into that? Like, how can I not put the brakes on, and just enjoy that moment of like attraction, even when I'm doing something so domestic like washing dishes. So I think it's getting more into the body and less into the head.
Erotism. Yes, like you said, like I just love to include eros in my life at all times because the
Yeah.
mundane things, the small moments, we just think
Yeah.
that sexuality and erotism has to be in a big
Mm,
with lingerie and this candles and
yeah.
it's also beautiful and amazing, but we live in the small
Yeah.
moments. We
Yeah.
live in the mundane moments and we can
Yeah.
make those moments conscious
Yeah.
and yummy if we
Yeah.
just to. It's not every moment because there's moments that we have to be in our head, there's moments that
Hmm.
we are in different places, but if we
Hmm.
have that consciousness of make the moments of
Yeah.
erotism mundane,
Yeah.
we live the most of our lives in the mundane.
Yeah.
Most of our
Like,
life is doing the dishes and dressing the thing and and, like
right.
it's not the big moments that are very important and amazing, but our
Right.
life is not completely filled with us with
Yeah.
that. And so that is beautiful what you said. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I heard this spiritual teacher like who was like channeling, and he was like channeling, this like, spiritual presence who was saying like whatever experience of like pleasure that you're having, like your soul wanted to have that. Your soul came to have that experience. I remember like one time I was single, I was in Santa Barbara, and I was like remembering that, and I was like cooking with like onions and garlic. And you know how it like smells so good when you're like sauteing that? And I just like allowed myself to just like smell that. I was like, this is one of the things my soul came to experience. Let me just like take this in before I move to the next step in the recipe.
God, amen to that. Yep. Yes, yes.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being in this podcast and sharing your
Oh,
story. Please let everybody know where they can find you, all your social media, your website. It's going to be on the show notes, but please
yes.
also know right now.
Yes, so my website is Christina-McMahon.com, and you can put, the spelling of that in the show notes. And I have a free dating mastery toolkit, which includes a dating guide for lasting love and a free love breakthrough meditation. And that's at www.getmydatingguide.com/sign up. And then you can opt into my Journey to Love newsletter and get that really cool. That's a great starter kit, for anyone who's like wanting to start on this conscious path to love. And on Instagram, I'm at cs_McMahon. And you can also find me the Insight Timer and the Aura meditation apps as well. I have a lot of great content there for helping helping single people, especially women, make breakthroughs with love. And then on my website, there's also work with me, one-on-one coaching, and also my online program that I created, which is opening to sacred love. So that breakdown, all the steps from inner prep to outer steps in the dating world of what you need to move towards love.
I love it. Well, if you guys resonate, there is so much that you can connect with. She has so many things that she is offering you. So if you connect with what she's saying in her journey, I know her in person and she's a spectacular human being. So please hit her up, follow if you like this episode. And if you think that somebody that is going through this needs to hear it, please share it with that person. This is how we get the word of mouth of this podcast, really, really sharing. And that's how I find a lot of podcasts with people sharing with me. So please share this podcast to anybody that you feel called to, that they need to hear this episode specifically. And follow us as well at sacred_alchemia on Instagram, and follow the podcast and give us a 5-rate review if you love it. And if you don't love it, don't put anything on it. Just keep moving away from your life. I'm not your person. That is totally okay. All right. And we'll see you guys next week for another episode of Orgasmica. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Virginia.